Coming to you from Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, this is the Quinn Spinn. Hey now, and welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, one and all, to a brand new edition of The Quinn Spinn. I'm your host, Quinn, back here on our brand new interview set here at Helping Our Music Evolve, right in the heart of Music City, East Nashville, Tennessee. We're back for another rousing and riveting installment of the official podcast of Underground Music Collective. You just heard Revel 9's All I've Become. That's been our opening theme song since the great year of 2014, and it will be until the very end of days. And I'm very excited for today's guest. I have Ender Bowen joining me, who's a musician and overall creative human being who's got a lot to say, and there's just so much, there's so much of you that goes into your work, and there's so many different influences that you draw from. And I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation for our audience. And first of all, thank you for coming on here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited to have you. We actually met through our friend Decree, who also is a good friend of the show. He was on a couple of years ago. Gotta have him back for a follow-up, and he's an incredible performer if you haven't had a chance to check him out live. But yeah, we met through him, and we had a phone conversation. Then he did a Nash live show with us, Cobra, and you were there.
Yep.
We were talking for like 10 minutes. I'm like, dude, just come on the show.
Yeah. It felt like a live podcast happening right there. So
lots to say, lots to cover, and you're here now. So I ask every guest of the show to start off 3 standard questions. Those questions are: who are you? What are your passions? And why on earth would you want to come on the Quinn Spinn?
Well, I'm Ender Bowen. I'm a musician, a writer. I write articles and books about things like joy and compassion. A lot of that goes into my music. And I would say, to answer your question about what I do or what my passion is, it's primarily, ultimately, I want people to know that they're not alone in the universe, that whatever they're struggling through, other people have experienced it. Maybe not in the exact same way, but I feel that passion aligns with my talents, which have to do mainly with music. And for me, music is a good way of connecting with people in that way, the same way that when I was younger and I felt very lonely, it reached out to me, and I kind of it's kind of like a pay it forward thing. I want to do that for other people, with music primarily, but with other things too.
And the third question: why on earth would you want to come on this show?
Why on earth would I not want to come on this show?
There we go. I like that. Good answer.
I like a place where I can have like a sort of freewheeling conversation about passions, dreams, and how to connect with communities and other people. And I just feel like this is a great place. After our conversation before, I'm like, I've got to go on this show. If the show is anything like our conversation, it's like,
it's pretty much exactly like that.
Exactly.
I pretty much, have a bunch of unrecorded Quinn Spinn episodes just out in my daily life. Out and about. You
should take a little recorder or something with you and just record and be like, can I keep this? And do like a clip, like they used to do in the old days on TV, clip show.
Quinn Spinn on the streets. Taking to the streets. I like that idea.
Take it.
Well, Ender, thank you so much for being here. And so you mentioned when you were younger, really finding yourself and feeling connected to music, to art, to the artists that were expressing themselves. It helped you not feel as alone. So let's dive deeper into that. Go from the beginning, as far back as you want to go, whatever you consider the beginning to be. Talk about your formative experiences, influences. What led you to this creative path that you're on?
Okay, well, I'll try and keep it succinct, but it really started when I was 4 or 5, and I first saw Van Halen's Jump music video on MTV, and it looked like it was so much fun that I said I want to do that. I wanted to be David Lee Roth, and from there, it was all music for me. I didn't really have a point or purpose in terms of what do I have now in terms of connecting with people and saying what I say and all that. I just knew something about that connected to me. And since then, I pretty much spent my whole life trying to create music, finding ways to create music. When I was 16, I played drums. I was in my first rock band. And it was around that time, maybe 2 years into that, I discovered drums is fun, but it's not as much there's not as much music creation there. And I felt like I had a voice that that needed to be heard. And so I taught myself how to play guitar. I taught myself how to record. I didn't do any of those things particularly well, but it was all part of the learning experience. And for me, not so much when I was 4, but I would say a couple years after that, we moved from a suburb up to the middle of nowhere, northern New York. And it was a great place to grow up, but it was not a lot of people. And most of the kids I grew up with were more interested in, going out and 4-wheelers and snowmobiles, and without a lot to do. There's a lot of drinking and drugs.
Yeah.
My particular clique didn't do a lot of that.
Right.
But I was really the only person that I'm like, I want to be a famous musician.
Right.
And it's different when you're growing up in like a big area like this, 50 people growing up that want to do that. So you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, doing that, being inside all the time and not, being a part of that sort of community of outdoorsy people that did that, and nobody really getting what I wanted to do with my passions, made me very, very lonely.
Yeah.
And especially working on music by myself, very, very lonely. So it wasn't until this is going to sound weird because they're such a huge band, but when I kind of discovered U2 at 15, they were saying and doing things that from a lyrical and spiritual perspective really connected with me. But the more I learned about them, the more I learned about how they came from an area that really didn't have a music scene.
Right.
And that's not to say, you had the Boomtown Rats, and I think you had a couple others, but they weren't gigantic, and it was hard to get gigs and be taken seriously. And even though it was a city, I related to that because where I grew up, I did not have an outlet. Like if I was going to play music, it was like maybe there was 10 people up there that played music, and it was all heavy metal, and I wasn't into that.
Right.
So that was kind of, I would say, my sort of formative experience with this is connecting with me from a musical and artistic standpoint. I'm not feeling so lonely anymore. And I didn't recognize it then, but that was the development, the sort of the beginning of me wanting to do the same thing for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something to be said for, I grew up in a similar area in New Jersey where it's rural.
Yeah.
There's really, you have a few bands, a few local bands, your high school pop punk bands, when I was growing up, in the early 2000s when I was in high school. But like, it's not taken seriously. It's taken as this thing, and then it's like, oh, well, what's your fallback option? What are you actually going to go to school for? What are you going to do?
Right, because probably where you grew up was very much good luck getting out of here and blah, 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 right? That's very much what I experienced was you're not going to make it doing that because I don't know if it's part of the psychology of what people have experienced growing up there, but that's kind of how it felt.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely this segment of the population, I would say, in any rural area that it's like, well, we live here, we die here, we live our whole lives here. There's really no going outside of this. Right. But as, somebody who identifies early that they want more and they want to go find more and find what connects to them, it can feel very isolating in that kind of environment. These towns where the high school football team is the biggest thing. And look, I played high school football, and the high school football team in my town, Long Valley, New Jersey, was the biggest thing going. We had a good arts program too, but it was like one of those things that was always looked at as a hobby, as opposed to something that you were going to go seriously pursue. You had a handful of kids who then went on to Berkeley or wherever to actually pursue it full time.
Was football considered serious enough? I know you're saying it was popular, but was it considered like that's actually a career track you can go on because you might get drafted or you might get a scholarship to a college? Was it considered like that where you were?
There were a couple kids who did go on to play Division I. Actually, Mike Burton, who's the fullback for the Chiefs, went to my high school.
There you go.
He graduated a few years after. But like for most of us, the mentality was, we're just kind of playing football. Maybe a couple go on to play in college, and everybody's just going to get jobs in finance or something. Yeah. Or like go into New York City and work and, kind of do what the generations before us did. But there's something to be said for identifying early that you have that cycle breaker in you.
Yes.
But when you're growing up and you're figuring that out and figuring out what that means and what makes you tick, it is isolating.
It's on top of that teenage isolation that you'd experience anyway. So it can be rough.
There's an additional layer of being ostracized that occurs in those scenarios a lot of the time where you just don't fit in.
Right.
And so that can be a very a very lonely experience growing up.
Yeah.
You'll find the other kids who are like you possibly,
Right.
But it's like at the end of the day, you always have to go out and kind of spread your wings.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to that point too, though, it's every kid deals with, I think, a sort of, like we were talking about the isolation, like a kind of loneliness. So me saying that I felt lonely because I was doing whatever I was doing and nobody got me, I'm not trying to say I'm unique. And actually, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make about wanting to create things that let people know they're not alone. Is I'm sure every single one of my friends were going through aspects of that. Every single one of the people that were going to my school were going through aspects of that. So I didn't have that realization then, of course, but once those kinds of things started to make sense to me, that's where I started going, wow, like not only can I be doing these things for other people, but there might be people I know that I can really touch, and I don't know in what way yet, but you know what I mean? Everybody goes through this experience and everyone's version of that and, level of how they deal with it and what they can deal with is different.
Yeah.
And every single one of them real in that respect.
I think the one thing we all go through is there's a lot of pressure to fit in, especially in middle school, high school, when that all starts. There's a lot of pressure to fit other people's expectations, fit into a box, and not really rattle any cages for a while. It's only once you get to college that you start, if you go, if you leave town, you leave the nest, where you start figuring out like, oh, there are other ways, there are other perspectives. Like college was that for me. I only went to school about an hour away, but it was like you're exposed to different people. You're exposed to people who've had different experiences from you. If you go from the country to a city or perhaps vice versa, it can be a little bit of a culture shock. But when you're growing up, there is that pressure of like, okay, I'm just trying to fit in. I'm just trying to fit in. I'm trying not to ruffle any feathers. And if you go against that grain, it does present its challenges. Yeah.
And my school was so small that, one person gets an idea about you about something and it's by the end of lunchtime.
Everyone has that idea.
Everyone has it. Whereas a bigger school, I'm not saying it's less intense in that way. It's probably the same amount of people, but you don't feel like the whole school is, just thinking about you a certain way or whatever, and that can be a little bit rough too. So
yeah. One thing, even in my adult life, that's been really, I think, helpful for me is coming to Nashville and realizing like this is where people come, to actually pursue the thing, whatever that thing is, whether, music, creativity in general. Now this is becoming a real creative hub here in the US. Nashville is not just for music. And it's interesting because even as an adult, you go back, like most small markets, like creativity is not taken that seriously, as far as like creating original music and expecting it to go somewhere, right?
It's almost like you have to have an industry in that area built around that concept to begin with. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, we got like 10 or 11 talented people here, but we don't have an industry built around that.
Exactly. I was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which I love Bethlehem. I'm going back for Music Fest next week to work. But the scenes there, the talents there, but the industry infrastructure is not in most places in the US, in the world. It's in a select few cities. But you come to a city like Nashville and you see all these people around you who came from somewhere else, who dealt with a lot of the same resistance in a way that you have. And it's easy to band together at that point. Really, I think that really contributes to this collaborative nature of living in Nashville right now. This idea of the rising tide raises all boats that I keep hearing people say. I keep saying myself, it's like, we all know what it's like to be that person who comes here because it wasn't working anywhere else, and so there's this sense of, I think, support and community that's pretty unique to this city right now and to this region.
And I would agree with that. I think one of the things I've always loved about Nashville is, I'm not saying there isn't a competitiveness, but it's not this sort of cutthroat competitiveness.
It's CoOppetition.
It's CoOppetition. Great way to put it. I feel like I've heard that before. Yeah. It's very much that. It's I'm gonna help you out, because it's almost like there's this instinctual, people aren't threatened by other people doing similar things here. You know what I mean? It's, whereas you go to New York, you go to LA or something like that, and it's like, I've got to beat that person to whatever that is. And it's like in Nashville, I just don't, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm not saying that there isn't a better, good, better, best ranking system of however you want to put it. But people don't act like that.
Right.
They're very helpful. And if you actually go to people these days, my wife and I also work in film and television.
Yeah.
And, you know, anyone we know pretty much at this point, we can go up and ask for help about like, how did you do what you're doing? How do I get more gigs doing what you're doing? What do I need to learn? And they'll sit down with you and talk with you for hours. Like, it's just, you know, just ask.
Yeah. And that's the one thing I learned immediately, even before I moved here. I took a trip down a couple weeks before I ended up moving here.
Yeah.
If you're doing good work for the right reasons, people want to help you.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you're playing the Quinn Spinn drinking game, I'm pretty sure I say that all the time. So go ahead, take a drink. But it's the truth. Like, it's the truth. Like, there's not this cutthroat nature. There's this real sense of camaraderie. It's like, okay, I know what it was like to be the new person.
Yeah.
So here, new person, let me help you along. As long as you're here to do good work for the right reasons. One thing I also appreciate about Nashville is that if you're not, that gets snuffed out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. People are really good heat seekers.
Yeah.
At that and be like, oh, you're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So not for any other reason than it's just no.
Yeah.
Yeah. We bumped into that with, you know, working on film and television again, like a PA who just doesn't do anything and doesn't really seem to understand it. It's like one of those things where you take them aside and say, hey, look, you really should be doing this. But if they continue to not do that and just take advantage of it, then it's like, well, then I'm willing to help, but like you gotta
pull
be
your
willing.
weight.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think too, like a good indicator is, how did they come into town in the first place? Did they come into town ready and willing to learn, ready to sit back and just observe for a little while and learn the ropes? Or did they come in here bragging about all the local awards they won back home, which in my opinion is the equivalent of you wearing your varsity jacket to the first day of college? Nobody cares. It's a fresh start. Like, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do to take yourself up from that level? Because like, you get to a place like Nashville, you get to one of these larger cities that are entertainment and creative hubs. Yeah. And it's the big leagues now. Yeah. Like, you got a chance back home to hone your craft. And like, no doubt that you did valuable work back there.
Sure, yeah.
But you come here and it's like, all right, it's a clean slate one way or another. What you do with that slate is going to dictate how far you go.
It's so funny you say that, though, because, I mean, I didn't have like all these awards or anything behind me. It wasn't anything like that. But I was kind of like, I don't even want to say big fish in a little pond. I had this own perception of me growing up. You know, I want to be a huge rock star, so I'm going to be a huge rock star. So when I moved to Nashville, I thought it's so funny to talk about now. I thought I was basically God's gift to music. Like, I'm destined to do this. So it's going to happen. And it's not to say I didn't put the work in or anything like that, but that was my attitude when I came down, almost exactly what you're talking about. And it didn't help that within 3 months of moving down here, I ended up getting signed to an indie label. That just exploded in my head. Right. I'm not saying I became a jerk or anything. It was sometimes affirmation of the skewed version of what you think you are or should be is not a good thing.
Right.
And what's funny about it is I worked on my own, and we talked about this before we started recording here, but I worked on my own making albums. I made, over the course of 4 years, I'd released 3 albums and an EP all on my own. And they weren't, you know, production wise great or anything, but I was doing work. And when I got signed to the label down here, that would have been February of 2007. From there to the point where I asked for my release in fall of 2008, we didn't do a darn thing. Right. It was like I made the mistake of feeling like, oh, I've done all this myself, and now that I've got like a machine behind me to do it for me, like, I'm going to let them go with it. Yeah. And I just have to work on the creative part, not the business. And in doing so, at least temporarily, I lost the rights to some of my best music. We didn't do any recording whatsoever. Yeah. The label pivoted to being more of an all-encompassing entertainment label instead of music. And I was basically, you know, within a couple months of signing my contract, I was old news. Yeah. So it was between that and losing the rights to my music for that period of time and a little bit longer. It was one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had. I don't ever want to go through that again, but I'm very grateful I did, because I think that made me a more grounded person. It made me realize that I'm not, you know, the end all be all of whatever I think I am. Right. And it really knocked me off my horse in a great way. The problem is it took forever for me to have any kind of confidence to make music again.
Right.
So there was a period where the whole reason my wife and I are in film and television too is because there was a whole period where I didn't want to do music anymore because it hurt too much. But that, that changed quite a few years back when my daughter was born. I can go into that later, but I think sometimes I haven't quite recovered from that is a good way to put it, because I still lack confidence in a lot of things. I'm terrified to, where before I was eager to go up on stage and perform, I'm terrified of going up on stage and performing. I'm terrified that I'm not good enough. I'm terrified. Like, it's almost the opposite. And I need to figure out a way to get myself back to that balance.
Right. So you're still working on that all these years later.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fascinating, because like that's the thing. These experiences, these formative experiences, do stick with us. You know? Like I remember when I first started this show, like I'm up in New Jersey. I'm literally recording in my parents' basement, and like my mom loved it, but everyone else was like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean? And it took me, I think, a long time to get past that and start taking what I do seriously as something that could grow. Yeah, because I wasn't getting a whole lot of encouragement from my immediate family. I wasn't getting a whole lot of, it wasn't getting a whole lot of love from the people closest to me.
That's rough too, isn't it?
Yeah. But the thing I learned about that is your following 9 times out of 10 isn't going to come from the people closest to you. It's going to come from the people that you connect with organically through your work.
That's right.
And fortunately, 9 years in, we've had a chance to do that here. But yeah, those things can rattle.
I was gonna say, look.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, this is a long way from the basement.
Yeah, it is.
Right here,
it is.
And, before that, it was a USB mic and a laptop, you know, and that, just an idea, But it helps to see that now, to see like what that could, what this idea has grown into, because in the beginning, like there were so many doubts and there was so much resistance, I think, when you start a new thing, it's going to require you to change, and that change makes a lot of people around you uncomfortable, and they kind of start wishing for the old you, but the old you isn't going to help you grow.
No,
at all. At all. And I'm so glad I'm not the old me. I'm so glad I'm not the me of 2 years ago.
Oh yeah, me too. I don't, in retrospect, I don't like that person I was talking about that first moved down here. That was, I'd been through a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of extra layers to why it was, but he was kind of a self-righteous jerk, and it's just weird to think of myself as ever being like that, right? But I can picture him, and I can picture his behavior, and I remember being in his head. That's the really terrifying thing. and I'm like, oh God, no, I don't want to be that guy. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm very grateful for that experience. I'm sure something else would have come along that would have made me who I am now. But that was the thing. And it created its own, it was a great learning experience, but it also created its own scars and broke a few other pieces that still need some mending, So, so the great thing is, in a sense, I still, when I talk about wanting to help people and the loneliness aspect and also helping people believe in themselves, it's a lot of it is, I have trouble with that too. Right. So I'm relating to it on that exact, base level. Yeah. At the same time, it's not I'm not just making stuff up or saying, well, this is what I want my brand to be, so I'm going to come up with all the right things to say. It's like, no, I'm also not super successful. So it's not like I'm somebody who goes, I went through this and this, and I can help you get through it too. It's like, I'm going through this and this. Yeah. Which I think is so much more powerful. I mean? Yeah, I think so. I'd like to think so. I think it is, because you're relating as a human being. You're not relating as this talking head marketing guru you see all over the internet. Like, well, let me tell you how to live. Oh yeah, I went through some stuff, but it doesn't matter because I'm perfect now. Right. I hate that shit. Yeah. I'm not a fan of that either. I hate it. Like and there was a time, like when I first moved here, where I was into it. Yeah. And then I just started seeing through it. And it's like, none of these people talk about what they're going through now, what they're currently struggling with. And it makes it very hard to relate, because it almost seems like all they're selling is a success aspect. And it's like, okay, well, everyone defines success differently. I get it. And you're defining it for yourself, and you're trying to define it for me. But there is that aspect of, okay, you're saying do this, do this, do this. And oh, I get to go on vacations, and oh, I get to do this, and all the other things. Look at how perfect my life is. Right. No, it's not. Yeah. Tell me the truth. Right. And it's okay if this has helped your life. I think it's great if some of these programs are helping people. I don't have a problem with that. But you're right. it's like, what's really going on? Like, I'm not relating to who you are now.
Right.
I'm relating to that, and I want to get out of that, but I'm not relating to who you are now.
Right.
And I think that's where they're missing the boat.
Yeah. And I think, it's always a composite experience. Like, there's nothing wrong with sharing what's going well and your successes and like what you've overcome, but don't try to separate yourself from it so much that that you're detaching from the reality of what it was or is at the time.
I was going to say you're still trying to overcome something.
Right.
I mean, if everyone is always trying to overcome something.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, that makes those stories more interesting. It's like, okay, you've had success and blah, blah, blah. What is it you're dealing with now?
Right.
I mean, maybe this has solved that portion, and maybe that hasn't even created new issues, but maybe you have other things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, to me, that's just when you can talk to people on that level, you can look at the most successful people in the world, like, I don't know, say a Jeff Bezos or something. I don't know why that came to my head, but like, I'm sure he deals with 1 trillion things a day that are stressful and problematic. Whether or not you like the guy, it doesn't matter. Like, the point is that everybody has their own level of and thresholds of what they can deal with and how well. And a lot of that comes from their experience, which, goes back to the compassion aspect. So.
Yeah. I think it's Elon Musk who, I was listening to Lewis Howes' School of Greatness podcast, and somebody was talking about Elon Musk who knows him personally. And Elon Musk tells people, you don't want my life. You don't want my life. Yeah, I'm rich, but like, there's no time to stop and smell those roses.
Well, imagine the amount of people who are when people smell money, they're suing you. Imagine the amount of attorneys he's got to have. On call just to deal with that.
More money, more problems, like Biggie said. Like, I can think of an example in my own life currently. Like, I've really leaned into the fitness thing, and I've been, sharing more and more of that on Instagram. And people will be like, "Oh, wow, you're in great shape." Like, yeah, I'm in great shape. Do you know how much frustration I'm channeling to get myself to be willing to go work out outside in this weather, in this heat right now?
And then not only that, but looking at yourself, and you're still probably going, that's not good enough. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as a human being, you're self-criticizing like that. Same way I do with my music. In
a way. I mean, I think I'm finally at like a level of fitness that I am happy with.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to look fake. You know what I mean?
No.
You see some of this bodybuilder stuff out there. I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's too much. Like, that's too far. But it's like, there's still this sense of like upkeep. Like, I've got to keep it up now, because like, I'm now holding myself to that standard. It's like, well, I can't go back on that.
No, and you got to keep those standards. But I bet you go through a day, maybe there's like a day or two, maybe even a row, where you don't work out, and you kind of get down on yourself about it, because you're like, oh, I didn't do that for those 2 days. It's this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I'm trying to learn Spanish with Duolingo, right? And I'll go a couple days without touching it because things got so busy, and I'll get mad at myself. Like, why didn't you do that? You're gonna get behind. You're gonna, and I know that's a lot of a psychological thing, but it's human beings. I don't know. Brains are interesting to me.
It's funny you say that, because I do the same thing where it's like, I just feel I need a rest day, and I like have to convince I have to look in the mirror and be like,
feel guilty about it.
Yeah, I have to be like, gee, rest days are a good thing.
Yeah.
Or I'll eat a bunch of things I shouldn't have eaten the day. But like yesterday was one of those days, and it's just like, oh man, like, okay, I had how many cups of coffee? I had a lot of sweets. Like, all right, I gotta hit it hard today.
Yeah.
Like, there is that, and like, even, I don't really go out a whole lot anymore, but like, if I go out and, I'm having a little rough morning the next day, it's like, oh dude, come on. I thought we were done with this. Like, I do have a habit, I think, of beating myself up for things that I don't necessarily have to beat myself up for, because they're not habits. They're just kind of like instances of,
it's called life.
Yeah. It's life.
Sometimes life is just going to be what life is. And I'm not saying, to me, people will say being content is the same as settling, for something shorter than what you deserve or smaller than what you deserve. And I think that's not wrong, but I think there's an aspect of understanding not where your limit is, but where this level is, right?
And appreciating it.
It. Yes. Appreciating the work you've done, appreciating that you deserve a day or two to have a little fun with your life. I mean, that's what living is, right? If living was just learning Duolingo all day or working out all day, would be kind of a dull life. Like, life is meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to have some fun. It doesn't matter how old you are. And I think it's just funny that human beings, sometimes we tend to just get very hard on ourselves about
and caught up in who we think we're supposed to be or what we're the roles we're supposed to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
very much so.
I find myself, because this is airing Thursday, I'm actually going to work Music Fest back in Bethlehem. I'm staying up north for the month, which is kind of scary to me because it's like I've never been out of Nashville that long. Like I'm the Nashville guy. But it's like I was thinking about it on my way home the other day because it's like I'm going to find some gig work up there. I've already started lining stuff up.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't I just go home and be normal for the month so I can come back, so I can miss Nashville a little bit and then come back firing in September?
Yeah, be recharged and be like, yeah, welcome home. It's great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but there's that sense of like in the back of my mind of I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this.
What am I missing? What isn't getting done?
Yeah,
I hear you.
All the FOMO, but it's like you need to factor in some time for yourself, because also like for me, going back home kind of reminds me like how far I've come, like,
that's a great way of looking at it.
Like going back, all my old communities are by and large the same as they've ever been, and it's refreshing to go back and dip your toe in, but then it's like, it gets you ready to come back and be like, all right, let's keep going.
You almost kind of go, I remember now why I'm not here.
Yeah. But it's also like, you want to carry that with you, and you want to carry the people back home with you and give them something to be proud of, like it's all of that, but you need to give yourself that step back once in a while from go. Summertime, August, like is the perfect time to do it, in my opinion, because I always get charged up for the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like I'm always like, okay, home stretch, like what is the final statement of this year going to be? And I'm already looking forward to driving back into town after Labor Day, seeing the skyline and being like, let's go.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's like you need to allow yourself to take that step back first so you can appreciate that more.
Yeah, you got to remind yourself that you're still Jenny from the block.
Exactly. Love it. So I want to touch on the music.
Oh yeah,
because
got all about.
yeah, that's what we're here for.
We'll just start talking.
Yeah, we're a music podcast. So you pull so many different influences in, so many different sounds, like no one song is the same experience, and I think that's very indicative of life, because no one, we're human beings with a full range of emotions. We're human beings with a full range of experiences. And I feel like you communicate that so well.
Oh, thank you.
In your music. So I want to dig into your process a little bit there.
Okay. Well, that's a really open. Okay. For me, why don't I talk about like for this album, I suppose. For me, kind of going back to what I was talking about, how I kind of got back into music.
Yeah.
I was still recording some music and putting it out during that period where I didn't really want to do music. I think it kind of shows a little bit in it, but, I remember being in the delivery room when my daughter was born. This was 2014. And I remember like holding her in my arms and looking out the window, and there was Nashville. And I thought to myself, I never, growing up, I never would have imagined that I would be living in Nashville, much less my kids being born in Nashville. It seemed like a far away, from where I grew up, it seemed like a faraway planet to me. And I had this sort of, I wouldn't call it an epiphany, but I had this thought of just like, you came down here for a reason, that was to do music, and your daughter's been born here. You haven't left despite everything you've gone through. You're still here for a reason. And that feeling was so powerful to me that I just kind of felt like I need to sit down and do music again. And the plan was to demo that fall, get a record out by the end of 2015. Yeah. And it did not go that way, because raising kids is and then the closer I got to getting the album done, we decided to have another one. So I'm like, oh. But yeah, the thought process for me for this particular album, it was partly about the range of emotions you feel when you have kids and you're trying to raise them, and you and your wife are both aspiring creatives, and you don't, as much as you have a lot of creative friends, your closest ones don't really relate to that. And you, it was trying to take a lot of what was happening in our lives then and connect it to a sort of innocence that we had before then, but through the sort of mindset of like our children.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to create this sort of looping circle. And
Mhm.
it's the funny thing about it is that the album's called The Art of Tactful Procrastination.
Mhm.
I'd actually come up with a name for that back in 2006 before I moved here. And it was always going to be the name of my next album.
Mhm.
It took that long. It took 8 years to start on it, and it took another 7 years to complete it.
Uh-huh.
So it was almost like art imitating life,
Yeah,
imitating art, imitating life. And it's just bizarre because
Yeah.
I never intended for that.
Mhm.
And for me, it was about, the whole album is really about the experience and the struggle of trying to realize what's important to you, realize
Right.
your dreams, realize your passions. And especially as you're growing up, you have more adult responsibilities, you got a job, a mortgage, children. How do you balance those things? Do you balance them? What happens if you focus more on family? What happens if you focus more on your dreams?
Yeah.
Like what gets lost in there?
Right.
And what do you become either way?
Right.
And so to put that point out there, I talk about a song like Weight of the World,
Mhm.
which is very much about like this sort of evil spirit whispering in your head, I'll give you everything you want, just give me your soul.
Right.
And at a certain point you get to a certain age where you're like, I've done this so long and I'm not seeing the success I want, maybe I should do that.
Right.
To something like Addie, which is a sort of a lullaby about my daughter, and talks about the sort of innocence of youth and remembering what it was like to be at the beginning of the whole process.
Yeah.
And then a song like The Storm, which is about the experience you have when you're trapped in monotony, and you're not trying to follow your dreams. And
Right.
you know you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing
Right.
right now, and it's torture, and it tortures everyone else in the house. And so it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where I am specifically kind of talking about me wanting to be a rock star when I was younger, but I tried to keep things ambiguous enough.
Yeah.
To relate to people on a level that it's about your dreams and your passions.
They can pull their own meaning
right.
from it.
It's not just my story, it's your story too. Right.
Yeah. Because I think in the creative sphere, we all go through those events where it's like we're trying to balance business and personal.
Yeah.
We're trying to balance life and the dream, right? Like I can relate to that. My nieces and nephew are back home. They're 800 miles away. The hardest part of being here is not being close to them, missing a lot as they grow up.
Yeah.
My oldest niece is going to be 13 in October.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's the coolest thing that I'm here. But it's like, there are definitely times where I'm like, can I just go be normal for a little bit? Can I go? They call me Gaga. Can I go be Gaga for a little while? And it's like, there is that, like, what do you do to make it all work and make sense? Like, but that's what keeps us moving forward too, is like getting to the level where we do have the freedom and we do have the power to go and show up for a birthday 800 miles away, but also come right back and axe to the grindstone, but also have it covered here so we can go away for a little bit and come back to it refreshed, like building to that point, but you have to, I think, make yourself get there to a point. Like you have to be willing to balance things out. Like you can't just go hard in one direction for so long that you forget about everything else, because
that's not fulfilling.
Yeah, it's not fulfilling. Those relationships are going to deteriorate. Like like we were saying before, you've got to be able to take that step back once in a while and step back into your other roles, so you can come back and give more. That's right. To all of your roles, so you don't get burned out on one that it starts affecting the others.
Yes. And to your point, my brother just had his first child and he's in Connecticut. And I don't ever get to see them. So I totally relate to what you're saying on that level. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the hardest thing, like you go up there and every time the kids are bigger.
I know.
Like, I was just telling my sister the other day, like her youngest is going into kindergarten. I'm like, tell her to stop getting big. I'm not going to be able to throw any of them around anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you miss a lot, but at the same time, like, you just have to keep in mind that you're doing it for a reason, and you're doing it to build a life that you can be proud of, and that you can use to impact people, including the people you care about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they can look at the blueprint, they can look at, hey, there's a different way to do this other than, what's been prescribed to me in my small hometown. Other than, the way I was raised, like I can step out and try something new, and I think like, for creative people who leave their hometowns, who are transplants somewhere else, like I feel a responsibility to my nieces and nephew to be like, there's another way to do things. You don't have to just follow the blueprint of school, job, house, kids, like all of that, all in a line. Like, it doesn't have to happen by a certain point. Like,
and that's part of the adventure of life too, though, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be, you've got to be willing to struggle a bit. You've got to be willing to go, okay, I'm going to go through it. It's like my wife right now is in Knoxville, working on a film.
Yeah.
And she's going to be gone. She might be back on some weekends, but for the most part, she's gone for the next couple months. I have never raised our 2 kids by myself for that length of time.
Right.
And we're both like, this is going to be hard. This is going to be difficult. This is going to make it more difficult for me to have time to work on music and creative things.
Right.
But we had talked for a long time about that. If we were going to have success, we knew that was always going to be at least part and parcel what that was going to look like.
Right.
So on the flip side of that, where we're going, this is going to be hard, we're having some of the success we talked about, because this is exactly what we talked about having to deal with.
Yeah.
Once we started seeing that.
Yeah.
So it's to the point about, oh, you're successful. Yeah, but we're still having struggles because you don't upkeep that and maintain that without dealing with those struggles. So you know what I mean? It's I don't know, it's just really interesting to me.
Yeah. I think it's important to get comfortable with the notion of not only being uncomfortable, but realizing that you can't put life on hold for the sake of creativity and vice versa.
Exactly.
You can't put one on hold for the other. Like, it's all happening. And if you want to find a way to make it work, there's a way to make it work.
The perfect way to make it work, and I don't know the secret to how to do it, is to get each to feed into the other. The creativity feeds into life, feeds into creativity.
Exactly.
And because if you can get them moving, it's almost like a belt on an engine that powers the thing that powers itself. That, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to do that. I think that's part of the secret to balancing those things, is to figure out how to get one to be the engine for the other.
Right.
Which is just, I don't know.
You have to go through the process. There's got
to be like some sort of a Japanese saying that really sums it up and really gives it to you. And
that's the one. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. But I think you just have to try it. You just have to try different things. And like, they're not all going to work. You know? I've had relationships end, but in part because of this whole thing. Like, there are definitely sacrifices you make, and things, people, relationships that fall by the wayside in the process, and you don't want that to happen, but it's just a byproduct of trying to figure it out. But you just show up and do your best and try better the next time.
But it's similar to, on the creative side, trying new things creatively, and some of them don't hit, some of them don't work. You don't connect with people like you thought you might.
Right.
So you got to try new things. So it's the same thing. Life, you're talking about relationships. Some of them work, some of them don't. Same with creativity. Some of the things you try work, some don't.
Yeah. Some projects are great ideas in principle, but then when you test them, oh, well, this was dumb. Why didn't I do it that way? And like, then there could be something that you don't expect to really ever go anywhere, and then you're sitting on a stage with the logo behind you 9 years later.
And you almost wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting here going,
yeah. But the thing is, it happens when you don't give up on it. It happens when you just you find a way. This show has gone through so many different iterations. Like, there was a whole period from 2016 to 19 where I call those the lost years of the podcast, because there were so many different formats and things I tried going live on internet radio for a little while. Like, the show floundered for a long time, and I think just really found its voice here in Nashville finally. But if you don't try those things and you don't push through the things that don't work to get to the ones that do, you'll never find them.
And you're always going to pick up things from the things that do. Same as jobs. It's funny. I've had plenty of jobs that were awful and I hated. And I mean, apart from them paying the bills, I can sit here right now and tell you that even the recording contract I had, I learned so much from those and added assets to my tool belt. Yeah, that I can run my own online stores. I know how to draw up legal contracts for songwriting and other stuff. I know what to watch out for when it comes to those kinds of things. So I'm still, even though those experiences were not fun, I'm still grateful for having had them, because they gave me tools I needed now. And I'm sure I'm going to have more of those experiences that aren't great, but as long as I can keep my mind open about why I'm having them, I really feel that I will
Yeah.
accept new assets into my tool belt.
Yeah. And I think that gets easier with the more discomfort you face, right?
Because you're used to the discomfort.
Yeah. Like at first, like, you know, try telling somebody in their teens or early 20s, like, oh, don't worry, this is going to teach you something. Like, I know me back then, I don't want to hear that. It was the end of the world. Whatever went wrong was the end of the world, you know? If I didn't get playing time in a football game, it was the end of the world back then.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's all part of the progress. Are you further along than you were? What did you learn from this that you can take forward with you? And I mean, yeah, even as you get older, the sting of certain things out, you know, is greater in some situations than others. But there's always that lesson there. And I think the more you get, the more bumps in the road that you hit, the more you know how to navigate.
Well, it's like learning how to hear no. It doesn't mean you're accepting no. What it means is you know what it feels like. You know how to accept it. You understand that it's a part of the process to hear no.
Yeah.
And once you realize that no is not the end of the world, it's just a filter.
Yeah.
It just filters out a thing, or it gives you another perspective on how to deal with that thing.
Yeah.
Once you start to work with it like that, no is not a bad thing. Sometimes it's actually a good thing.
Yeah. It points you away from the things that aren't for you.
Thank you.
Anything can happen in live video podcasting.
Yeah.
It points you away from the things that aren't for you and toward the things that are. And the trick then is not being so attached to the things that aren't. That is a challenge for me. I know. Like,
it's a challenge for me as well. Yeah, I totally understand that.
Because sometimes you really want something to work, whether it's a project, whether it's a relationship, whatever it is. And it just becomes clear as day to you that it's not going to. And that can be a very bitter pill to swallow the more attached you are to the situation. But you have to learn to detach, let go, and put that energy, put that love that, you know, into what you can control at that point. And the direction, you know, that becomes clearer to you by those things that don't work out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of balancing, so not only are we talking about balancing life and creativity, but I think there's something to be said for balancing all the creative projects that you have your hands in, whether it's music, TV, film, being an author. Like, how do you keep those all in balance, number one? And number two, how do they all inform each other?
Well, the answer to number one is I don't know. Because I'm still constantly, it would probably be easier if I didn't have children, because with children, you know, they're constantly, they're in their years where they're constantly evolving. I have one who's 4 and one who's 8.
Oh yeah.
So it's like every day is a new day with them. So even if I had all this other stuff balanced out and sorted, it would be what am I doing? And that's fine, actually. It adds to the creativity. It adds to the, I like a fairly high level of not being able to predict what's going on. Makes life more exciting. But to answer your question about how all the projects inform each other, I do still look at just about everything I do as coming down to, I want people to know they're not alone. Whether that's through talking about compassion, which I do through my website. It's called God Jots. It's mainly, I mean, it does talk about, you know, my faith, but it mainly talks about compassion and what that means, and how to get to know people and understand people and hear them and hear their story, because we live in such a divisive world right now, and we don't get anywhere with that. And everyone's experience is real, no matter what it is. Going back to that threshold of what they can deal with, it might seem silly that somebody can't take a stubbed toe, but there's a reason for that. And then the other thing I do is called Operation Joy, which is about inspiring joy from something as simple as just, you know, smile at somebody, because you never know how it can go viral. You can change a person's, if not their day, their next 5 minutes, but they can, by smiling, they'll smile and change another person's 5 minutes. So I create these, that I've actually published a book with, and it's, I create these daily missions where it's just like, your mission today is smile at somebody, right? To use that example. Very simple stuff, so that people can kind of take things that seem big to them. I want to be a good person. I want to do good things for people. Well, here, take it down to the tiniest thing and give yourself a whole day to do it, that one thing. And if you keep on doing that, like today it's smiling, tomorrow it's write a letter to a friend, the next day it's call your mother, I don't know. You will start to train your brain to know to do something, and you might even come up with your own things. And they're not too elaborate. I've got a few elaborate ones, but for the most part, I try to keep it super simple and succinct. And the same thing with the stuff I talk about with compassion is just, listen, be honest, let people tell their story, get to know people, because once you get to know people, even people you vehemently disagree with, once you know that person, you will want for that person.
Yeah.
Even if their needs are contrary to your own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where compromise really comes in.
Yeah.
Because you actually want to help them get what they want.
Yeah.
It's not about just getting what you want. And to me, that's my goal. And to kind of dovetail that into the music is also very much through, trying to get people through struggles and emotions. That's kind of where I put a lot of myself out there to kind of go, okay, where can I connect with people there? So for me, between writing and music, it really is all about, it's connecting with people, helping people through struggles, whatever those are. And I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist or anything like that. It's nothing like that. It's just taking my experiences and experiences I've had with other people and saying, well, how did that not work? And how could it?
Right.
And providing that to people. And I'm not trying to say I'm an expert in anything.
Right.
It's basically just saying, this is what my life has been telling me. Use what works for you.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing.
Putting that forth to the people who, and whoever's ready to accept and hear that message will. Right. And not everyone is. And there's a part to all this of having to accept the fact that sometimes people aren't ready to hear it. They're not ready for that kind of connection. Yep. And I think as creatives, we can get so caught up in that and wanting to make someone see,
Yeah.
But your audience is your audience, and your audience is, it's comprised of the people who are ready to receive your message, who are ready for that level of connection.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And to the point we were talking about before, I don't come at this from I've been through it and I know what to do.
Right.
It's a lot of the time it's man, I just had this feeling about something. I'm going to write it down, and I really think this is going to be helpful because I'm going through it too.
Yeah.
Half the time I'm writing this stuff. I mean, it sounds selfish in a way. I'm kind of writing it for me. Right. To kind of help me.
Yeah.
But to a point that I made to another friend, I have another friend who does a podcast too. And we were talking about how everyone's broken in one way, shape, or form. Artists, I think, are very broken. But what they do is, in trying to heal themselves with their creativity, even if they don't consciously know that's what they're trying to do, they end up helping others heal their brokenness and probably themselves still stay very broken. Right. So because it's feeding other people and not as much themselves. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. Right. It's just, and I don't mean that to make it sound like, oh, dying on my cross here or I'm sacrificing something. Right. It's not like that. It's just, I think that's how it happens, because if the artist isn't still broken in whatever that way is, they aren't still going to create those things that are helping other people heal. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I want to help. I want to bring a smile to someone's face. I want someone to get up in the morning and be like, you know what? I can do this. It's not going to happen today. But if I start doing these tiny little things, like broadcasting from the basement, right? If I start doing this, just get up in the morning and do it. Yeah. Someday I'm going to be on a stage with my logo behind me, podcasting live with a video in front of me. And 10 years from now, you're going to be doing it live with an audience, with several guests that are probably quite well known. Some of them you might have even helped get well known. You know what I mean? So the journey's not over. Right. It's still going. Yeah. And even then you're going to have another 10 years of where could it go? Yeah. So I think sometimes, to me, the journey is just incredible. When people say, oh, I've arrived, it's like, well, to what? To what? If you're not journeying, you're not living. Right. If you're not learning, you're not living. If you're not trying to be better than what you were the day before, you said it yourself. Yeah. That's all a part of life. And to your point about the rising tide lifting all ships in Nashville, I think it's the same from a personal level of the better I make myself, I want people to see it. Yeah. And I want it to help them. Whether or not I'm telling them directly what I'm doing, or it'd be fun to just have a camera up in my house and just follow me everywhere and look at all the mistakes I make. Right. Right. Yeah. Your cat threw up and you haven't picked it up in 2 days. What are you doing, dude? Hey, get off Instagram.
To really scrub that toilet.
Yeah. Scrub that toilet, man.
Yeah. But the journey, an inherent part of the journey that's just life is it's always going to give you new things to heal from and new things to channel into your art and new things to channel into your creativity.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
know, and you made an interesting point there about how artists often heal other people before they heal themselves. You think of somebody like Chester Bennington, perfect example of that. Touched so many millions of lives all over the world.
Yeah.
Took his own life, you know, because he was struggling with demons that a lot of people even close to him had no idea he was still struggling with. Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Robin Williams. I mean, that was like, you want to talk about somebody who like changed the world through humor.
Yeah. That was a big one for me too, because not knowing what he was experiencing, and yet he brought so much joy to me and other people. I don't know, that one just, that still hurts.
Yeah.
To know that.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is like, it's this energy exchange of like, okay, if I can heal others, maybe that'll make me feel okay. But the pitfall of that is often, you know, it can be a mask for not actually going inward, because going inward can be terrifying. And that's, a lot of people don't go inward, you know, deeply enough a lot of the time to really understand what is causing the root of their pain, right?
Yeah.
And so people end up masking, you know, whether it's with humor, whether it's, you know, with, you know, creative healthy outlets, or whether it's with drugs or sex or alcohol or gambling, you know, all these different addictions, right? Like there's always a way, especially in this day and age, to distract ourselves from doing the true healing we need to do. But at the same time,
because that's easier too.
Yeah. But having not done the healing gives us more to talk about. That's, I guess, in a way more compelling, you know.
Isn't that weird?
Artistic standpoint.
It's almost like the energy, you must obviously be spending energy on avoiding it.
Right.
Because all of it's, you know, here it is. This is like this fuel that you're just putting out into the world. And I don't know. Like, I really wish, I've said this to a lot of people, I really wish I'd taken a major in psychology, because I think I would have really, really enjoyed how people's brains work.
Yeah.
What the experiences cause, and how one experience even that lasts for 2 minutes can have an extremely traumatic effect on the entire rest of your life. Is amazing to me. And and by talking about the things I've been talking about, I'm not saying I'm trying to solve those things by any means. But it's like when I'm making music, all I'm really trying to do, I would love to change a person's life. I would love to change a person's day. I'd love to change the world. But if I can change a person's next 5 minutes, and that does enough to, you know, just take away whatever that pain is for 5 minutes, then that's worth it to me. It does mean they might go back to hurting after that 5 minutes is over, and that sucks. But, you know, if they're finding ways to it goes in this like Tony Robbins thing, you know, you just felt good there. Well, what can you do about that? Like, in a healthy way, not drugs and stuff like that.
What can you do to get back there more consistently?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think music is a healthy outlet for that. And smiling at people, holding a door open for someone, you know, that feels good.
Yeah.
And I feel like those are healthy alternatives to getting into things like drugs and alcohol and whatever, and relying on those substances so much. So that's kind of what I want to be, is a source of that. I want to be like, hey, Ender Bowen, the healthy alternative.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, you know, it's a noble mission, you know. You know, it's to provide people with some sense of temporary healing. It's a noble mission, and it's something that I think, again, is a responsibility of all of us creating. Like, who and what are we creating for? You know, are we creating out of service, or are we creating out of ego? Are we creating to have an impact, or are we creating so the focus is on us?
Yeah.
You know, and there's a very distinct difference between those two to me.
There is.
You know, and it's becoming easier for me to notice as I do this and become longer in the tooth. You know, the people who are creating and behaving out of service versus the people who are creating and behaving to see what they can get and how far they can go. But the catch to that is, how far are you going to go if you're not building community? How far are you going to go if you're not having an impact? Like, you can fake it for a little while, but eventually it's going to catch up to you.
Well, and to play a pseudo devil's advocate, I 100% agree with that. But I think there's also another side to that. There's a duality to just about everything. How far are you going to get if it's not serving yourself in some way? Right. And knowing where this has served me, but now it's becoming too much about me, or it's becoming about ego, or it's becoming about
Mhm.
right, like
Right.
the money,
Right.
whatever it is. I think a healthy balance of that is good.
Yeah.
I think it's better to lean in the community aspect.
Serve the community in a way that suits you.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think that's the happy medium there.
I think you're right.
Because you don't want to go into people pleasing territory and just do it for the sake of.
You end up emptying yourself.
Yeah, emptying yourself.
And that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. Like, do it in a way that serves you, but also make sure you're going back and giving yourself what you need on a personal level
Mhm.
to refill that cup.
Yeah.
So you can pour.
And I can tell you, for me, when I was younger, I wanted to be rich and famous, right?
Mhm.
But not that I would be super. I don't think I would enjoy that so much right now. I think that would be too much. But what I enjoy, and I've had this happen over the few years since I, putting this album out last year, writing those books and those blogs.
Mhm.
I don't have a large audience by any means.
Right.
I would love to do that, mainly because, yes, it would pay the bills, but it would also mean I'm helping people. Like, if people are coming to me
Mhm.
and they're reading my books and they're listening to my music, I know I'm helping people.
Right.
But every now and then I'll get I've actually gotten letters from people. I've gotten emails, personal emails that or comments on a blog that was just like, this, I did not think of that. And
Mhm.
this totally changed my day. My husband's been dealing with this, and I didn't realize that maybe he was thinking this way or acting this way because of that. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, I don't know your situation, and I'm hoping, this little piece of this that you got from that is going to help you.
Mhm.
But when somebody says something like that to me, to me, in a way, it does sound self-serving because I'm getting gratitude for it and acknowledgement of having done it, and that
Mhm.
feels good.
Yeah.
And I like that, but to me, what it is more of is knowing that the thing I'm putting out in the world is helping people. I don't necessarily need the gratitude. It's just when I can see that letter come back and say that helped, I'm like, awesome, it helped.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
I'm not doing it for nothing.
Right.
That kind of a thing.
Yeah.
There's a thin line there, but and sometimes it's hard to tread, because I'm a human being, but
Yeah.
it is great to know that I am having an effect.
Yeah.
And that is serving the community.
Mhm.
And I want to keep doing that.
Yeah. It all comes down to the saying, I want to have an impact, and where the inflection lies. Is it I want to have an impact, or I want to have an impact?
Mm-hmm.
I is serving the ego.
It is.
Impact is serving,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Mhm.
And that's something I keep coming back to, here. We are coming up on time here, so I do want to.
God, that went by fast.
Yeah, right? Well, we'll definitely do this again.
I was going to say, we probably will have to do this again.
We could do a Joe Rogan 3.5 hour special probably if we wanted to. the two of us.
I'm in.
But before we do that, I just want to give you a chance to tell people about what is on the horizon for you.
Okay. On the horizon for me is I'm actually working right now on compiling some things I never released before on anything. Kind of a equivalent to like a Smashing Pumpkins Pisces Iscariot or Oasis's Master Plan.
Mhm.
Just things that are left over,
Yeah.
including some B-sides maybe. And I want to get that out. If it's not by the end of the year, it will definitely be at the beginning of next year. And I am working on a new album. I'm demoing that right now. And as you and I had talked about earlier before we started, I have a lot of music that's not on Spotify or anything like that yet, prior releases.
Yeah.
The music I talked about
Mhm.
before getting the record contract needs to be kind of cleaned up a little bit because I didn't know what I was doing then, get it remixed, put it up. So, right now I've got maybe 30 songs online, but I've actually got more than 100 that are ready to go on there. So if you check out Ender Bowen, enderbowen.com. That's ENDER Bowen, BOWEN.com. I'll be constantly putting stuff up. I've got free music if you join my mail list. I like to be fun and weird and kind of bizarre. So even though we talk about very grounded things, that is really what I'm about. But I like to be weird too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
just have a little fun with being who I am. You can find Operation Joy at operationjoy.com. Godjots.com is for Godjots. And I'm updating those now and getting rebrands going, and I'll have more books and stuff coming out with them. So and videos. I haven't exactly known what I'm going to do with those yet, but I've learned a lot more over the years about how to do these things, and now I feel like I'm on the cusp of doing it right.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I'm up to right now.
All right. Lots happening. Ender Bowen, make sure you go to enderbowen.com, learn everything there is to know, and keep an eye on those projects to come as well. Very exciting.
Thank you so much for having me here. This was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and welcome back anytime.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have more to talk about pretty soon. So
absolutely.
Let's definitely do it.
We'll do.
Yeah, and you're listening to the Quinn Spin or watching the Quinn Spin. That's 2 N's in Quinn, 2 N's in Spin. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Stitcher, YouTube, and more. Also, learn more about the show at undergroundmusiccollective.com. That's our central hub for all things independent music, creativity, humanity, and more. UMC is also on all the socials: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. As I mentioned, also the UMC 20 playlist is on Spotify. We'll surely have one of those tracks from the album on UMC 20 here coming up in the next couple weeks. And also, this episode of the Quinn Spin, after it comes out, will be a bonus track on UMC 20 because that's what we do now. We try to, get those listener numbers up. NashLive.live, plenty coming up, plenty in store. We've already announced our listening room takeover on October 3rd. That's a Monday, 8:30 p.m. We've got a great songwriter lineup from here in Nashville and beyond. Go to NashLive.live to learn more about that show and others that are coming up this fall, winter, and afterwards. And Revel 9's All I've Become. It's going to take us out just like it brought us in and brings us in every time until the end of time. I'll see you next time. Hey now.